Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know if people can hear me.
Okay, testing. Oh, okay. All right. Jesus, fuck. Like, I should look at the chat when you guys say, hey, everybody. When you say, Kitze, you're muted, yeah, I should listen to you, but I wasn't looking at the chat. Is it fine now? Better. Cool. As you can know with my streams, there cannot be one starting of a stream without something going wrong. The titles are wrong, the screen is wrong, the mic is wrong. We'll get there one day. So again, if you didn't hear me, I'm gonna try to make this someone is teaching me about something, a regular Friday stream. So today I have here the Kitze, me, who is a clueless person about databases, backends and stuff. And we have Brecht, who is a FaunaDB expert. He decided to join me today. So welcome, Brecht.
Thank you. Hi, guys.
Me and Brecht just met, literally. Like, he hopped on my Zoom call and I didn't even say, hi, man, how are you? We just jumped into like a 30-minute setup. So instead of doing that off stream, we're going to introduce ourselves to each other on stream. So yeah, man, tell me more about yourself. I saw, like, the only thing that I know about you is just the Twitter bio. I saw in your Twitter bio that you're also a musician, guitarist and so on, and you're an expert at databases at FaunaDB. So just tell people and me more about yourself.
Okay, yeah, so I've been a developer for most of my life, full stack developer, did a bit of consultancy, did a bit of research and all that. But since recently I work at FaunaDB, I've been following the database for quite a while, actually, before I got to work there. And I found it that interesting that at a certain moment I saw they had
when was this founded? I only heard about Fauna, I don't know, like 5-6 months ago, but when was the actual, when did it start?
I would have to look it up myself, but it's like 6 or 7 years ago, I think.
Wow, really? I had no idea. I thought it was like a hot new thing, hype thing.
2011.
Wow.
But as databases go, databases require so much work that it takes a while until you get out there, of course.
Yeah. I have a question for the chat. Let me know if the audio level of Brecht and the audio level of me and the music, if everything is fine, if you can hear us fine. Otherwise, I'll just increase or decrease someone's audio if that's needed. Hi Fritas, hi Ryan, Not Your Point, Renato, whoever's watching, everyone says it's fine. Perfect. So this thing exists since 2011. You started working on it, when did you say, last year or?
I started working there for 5 months ago, more or less. So if I don't know everything, that's normal.
Yeah.
But I started as a developer advocate, and yeah, one of the reasons as well is that I also did some video editing and audio editing because I'm a musician. It actually only noticed now that we have exactly
Do we have the same
headphones.
Yeah, headphones bros. Cool.
And yeah, I'm a singer and a guitarist as well, so I do mostly heavy metal singing and hard rock singing.
Dope. I'm a guitarist as well. Like, screw this database web dev thing. Let's do a collab on a jam or whatever. So they're saying in the chat that your audio is a little bit low. If you can bump your microphone from your side somehow, just a little bit. If you have some knob.
My microphone closer.
Or closer, that would be perfect. Yeah. Do you have anything recorded, like from your music stuff? Is anything online?
Well, I'm doing a lot of collaborations at the moment. Actually, I started my YouTube channel like 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
and
cool.
There are 2 collaborations on there at the moment. And beside of that, my band is Ethereal Darkness. They have a CD on Spotify, so Ethereal, so not eternal.
Cool.
Ethereal.
We can plug that. You should have told me, but we're gonna plug it at the end of the chat. We're gonna plug in your band. And let's see, if our collaboration on databases and stuff works fine, maybe we'll record a music thingy one day. Yeah, all right. So the idea is to have like a 1.5 hour stream and to pack as much information as possible. So we're not going to tell you everything about music and shit. We're going to actually dive straight into this. So I'm going to switch to my screen here and we're going to see the landing page for FaunaDB. I have taken just one glance at this a couple of months ago, 5-6 months ago, or maybe more. And just right now before the stream, we logged in and it turns out I had one database, but I've never actually dived into this thing. So we're gonna go like straight to the landing page just to explore like what the hell is going on here. So the main tagline that you have is the database built for serverless featuring native GraphQL. So just to tell people my experience with serverless recently. So all of my backends and stuff were hosted. They weren't serverless. They were just normal Node.js servers, and they were hosted on now. Sorry, they are hosted on Vercel. You cannot say Vercel without sounding, like they were hosted on Zeit now, whatever. And then now in 2018 or 19, wherever it was, they issued like they released now 2.0, and they said for 2.0 everything has to be serverless, otherwise it won't work. So I was just pushing that information aside. I was like, I don't want to make it serverless, dude, because it works, and I don't want to make it serverless because it works. So now they're creating like more work for me in order to move all of my backends to be serverless when they were perfectly fine as servers. You were paying a lot of money, that's fine, they were fine. However, they issued a mail recently that said now 1.0 services are going away. They're gonna stop working in August. But since right now, you cannot deploy, like you cannot commit something and deploy something to now 1.0. So I was like, okay, let me learn about serverless. I don't have to, but maybe I'm gonna upgrade my stuff to now 2.0. And then I was looking at serverless GraphQL, and just from my like terrible 1 hour research, I was like, why does this exist? I don't want this. Like in my head, it doesn't make sense. Like then I moved to another hosting service. I moved to render.com. So I moved all of my services. They work perfectly fine on Node.js with a traditional server. But I'm wondering, like, if you can tell me as an expert, what is the deal with serverless and GraphQL? Like, why is this such a hype, serverless and GraphQL? What is the advantage? What is the...
Well, the hype of serverless actually is already cooling off. So there was a hype of serverless, and that hype is coming back with
No, for serverless GraphQL. I know the hype for serverless is here and there. Serverless GraphQL, okay. What is the deal with that?
Well, actually, this tagline is not really about serverless in combination with GraphQL or serverless GraphQL, but basically, I assume that most people they want to use GraphQL. They want to get started, and then they get into the resolvers, and then they want to connect these resolvers to the database. And at a certain moment, they want to do very complex join patterns that they have to resolve. Which has two problems. It's actually more complex than you think at first, and second is that it can get inefficient in the sense that many GraphQL solutions will require you to do multiple queries to actually get the results of a join. And that is referred to as the N+1 problem. And in essence, it's more difficult to set up your GraphQL endpoint than you might imagine. And I think that's why people are actually looking at serverless GraphQL providers.
But the reality is, it's like insanely way easier. Sorry if I'm going against you here, but for me at least, it's insanely way easier to like deploy a traditional Node.js server that you run with npm start or whatever your command is, and then it says your server is running on localhost 4000. You want to do in-memory caching, logging, whatever it is, you can count that this server is up and running. When I read through the serverless tutorials for GraphQL, it seems like all of this additional complexity, that at the end of the day, I get it. It kind of saves you money because it's only like the functions will be running whenever someone calls the function or whatever, and the server has to run all the time, and all of these hostings are charging you minutes for the amount of time that the server is running. However, like when I compare the amount of time that I would need to make a serverless thing compared to the amount of money that I'm paying, I'm like, I'm fine with servers. But
well, I think it depends. I think that's first of all very opinionated, because if you go to the Jamstack audience, who love Netlify and Vercel, they actually set up serverless backed applications in minutes without a problem, because they're so used to it, and because actually
you can set it up.
And Vercel takes everything out of your hands there. And I think that at a certain moment you might want to do more complex things, and then it gets more complicated. That's true. But the other side of it is, it's true that setting up a Node.js application is quite easy in Node.js server, and I still do that all the time, by the way. But deploying that and making sure that it scales and making sure that it's multi-region and all these things, that's where the complexity comes, and that's something people really don't want to do. And not only don't want to do it, you can actually see that people tend to be very, very bad at keeping these things running when their application grows. And basically, they just don't want to care. They just want it to work automatically and
scale
don't
infinitely.
Have to worry about the scaling, about the the operations basically.
Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, I misread the tagline. It says it's featuring native GraphQL, but the database is actually built for serverless.
Yeah.
Can you
And
explain that to me like I'm 5? Like why is the database built for
yes,
serverless? What are the advantages?
people actually don't really. Some people don't like it if we say that the database is built for serverless. What does serverless even mean? But basically, it's built for things that are serverless, as in a Jamstack that is deployed on a CDN, where you don't care anymore about servers. It's not that there are no servers, you just don't care about these servers anymore. And the other part is, of course, serverless functions. And there's a problem with that. So Jamstack people will try to will benefit from accessing the database straightly from the front end.
Yeah.
And
I
then you have
love that the
serverless
term
functions will
Jamstack
want
people
to-
exists. Sorry for interrupting you, but I love that there's a term out there in the development. Oh, I'm just a Jamstack dude. You know, we're just Jamstack people. That seems to me. But anyway, not to ruin your point, Jamstack
think I
people
just-
love serverless. That's a sentence that makes me want to quit web development forever.
They actually love the fact that you can access the database straight from the front end.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the story is serverless functions. It's actually pretty hard to find a database that scales with serverless functions, because at a certain moment you have to open connections, and serverless functions don't stick around.
Yeah.
So if there is a limit on the amount of connections, you have to find a solution for that. Basically, FaunaDB is just an API, a token-based API. So basically, it's connectionless. You don't have to open a connection over which you will communicate. It just behaves like an API. So that's what makes it prepared for serverless. And the fact that serverless, you often go there because you want pay as you go. And we're one of the few databases where you actually are completely pay as you go with a very, very generous free tier. So people come to us because they want to scale along. They don't want to pay beforehand a big sum to keep a server running. So at first they start with the free tier, they don't pay anything, and then it scales up as their business scales up. So basically that makes it a good fit for serverless as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I like about it from what I've seen so far, and I haven't seen a lot, and it's something that drives me crazy about other databases and other database solutions. Like you can go to the, let's just jump straight to the dashboard. I'm already logged in. I'm not going to log in because I'm already logged in. Hopefully there's not sensitive information or whatever here. Doesn't matter. Like it's just a demo. I've never had an actual database here. Like to me, it doesn't, like I'm not praising it because you're here and I'm like, oh my God, Fauna is so great. Like I don't care. I have streams where I'm telling people, hey man, this sucks. This should be improved. So I'm saying this like in my mind, like I tried to do something with backends maybe 7 or like 8 years ago. And it drives me insane that a lot of things haven't changed. That most people that do databases or whatever, they're going to go in a terminal, they're going to brew install, whatever. They're going to download some binaries from 2012 about installing SQL things. Then you have to run 18 commands and then you have a connection string and all of that shit. And I'm like, back in 2013, 14, I was like, one day there's going to be a service where you go in it, you click a button that says create my database and it exists somewhere. I just connect to it. So when I see this button, it gives me hope for the future of the web. I know there are a lot of people like in the chat or everywhere are going to be like, well, but I want more control and I want things to like, fuck that. Okay. Whoever disagrees with me on the chat, I don't care, because this is the future. You get a UI, you click new database and it works. Hopefully you're not going to ruin my dreams by saying, oh, this doesn't do anything. This actually, okay, it does stuff. I'm happy. It does things. Cool. What do you say in the chat? Don't forget to flush privilege after you change the MySQL root password. Yeah, fuck that. Root passwords and all of it. Hopefully things are way easier with this. Right? I just fucking hope so. That in a few minutes you're not going to be like, well, man, you have to install the Fauna CLI and the root password and host to Heroku or whatever. Or that's it. Do you do everything on the platform? Are you here? Are you listening?
Yeah. I'm here, yeah. But I'm missing some of the conversation apparently.
Why? Are you... I'm
Okay,
unmuted.
What was the question?
Maybe Zoom is
think
screwing
it was-
up. So,
It was a network issue, I think.
okay, whatever. It's like, is everything regarding the creation and update of this database and whatever the hell, is everything happening in the UI on the web like this? Or do you still do things in the CLI and wherever else?
You can do both. And I think the end goal is that as much as possible can be done in the UI. And we come already quite far there. You can actually... So basically, if you create a database, you can make indexes on the database, you can query the database, you can make documents on the database, you can make collections, and you can just drop in a GraphQL schema and you will have your GraphQL playground where you can actually start querying your GraphQL. So it's the goal to have as much as possible there. I forgot one thing. You can even define your security roles as well, but I don't think we have everything yet. But the idea is that you have both. We have language drivers, which you would use if you write a Node.js backend, for example, and you would connect with FaunaDB, or if you want to connect from the front end. But most of the things can be done here because we do believe the first impression that you get is the UI. So if it already allows you to play around with it, that will help a lot for people.
Yeah, just to get started, to feel like you're getting somewhere. Because if you're like, let's create whatever database in like, not naming any names and stuff, whatever database provider you decide to use, in order to create it, you have to follow a tutorial from 2003 that's 7 pages long until you get an actual table and you see some data. It's so fucking frustrating. So anyway, I'm just curious, one more question before we, like, you said Fauna existed since 2011, but since when did it shift to like featuring native GraphQL? When was the GraphQL part added? I think that's when I heard about it, because they actually, I mean, you actually started talking about GraphQL. When was that shift?
Yeah, I think that wasn't that long ago, but it happened just before I arrived at Fauna, so I don't know by heart.
But it happened recently. It wasn't like meant to be.
It wasn't like 3 years ago. It was like I think a year and a half.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But indeed, people like GraphQL that much that it did have an impact. A lot of people are using the GraphQL layer. Yeah,
well, somebody is mentioning in the chat, they're mentioning Firestore was a revelation for me. Never used Fauna though. Personally, never used Firestore, but back in the day I was using like just Firebase, and I was also happy because you can do a lot of stuff through the UI and you can get very far. But then I still had the problem on the client because there wasn't a GraphQL thing for Firebase. When you want to fetch a bunch of categories with posts, with comments, you have to do 3 different REST queries or whatever, Firebase live queries, whatever they were called, in order to mash that data together. So GraphQL didn't exist back then, but in my mind I was like, oh my god, this has to be easier. We can express yourself and say, I want categories, posts, and comments just in one query. So I guess that's the biggest advantage that you have here. You're doing everything through a UI and you get GraphQL out of the box. So that's nice.
Actually, yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that GraphQL provides you with that possibility, because there you're actually, in that case, you would use GraphQL to combine queries, because there are no joins in such a database, for example. FaunaDB is created to be relational. So basically you can do joins, you can have relations, and it's scalable at the same time. And that's one of the unique features, the combination of that. So distributed, scalable, and still have relations while still have consistency. And that's interesting because the native GraphQL part, what did native actually mean there, is that one GraphQL query actually translates to one FQL query, and FQL stands for the Fauna query language. So
so there's an
you
FQL
basically get
thing.
the same, and you basically get the same efficiency as the underlying language. So it's not a combination of multiple queries. It's one query, so you can do one transaction with GraphQL, which has huge advantages.
Okay, so I have no idea what is FQL. We're gonna see in a second, hopefully. So which route do you recommend to go, simple or FQL?
I think to just get started, we might throw in a GraphQL schema and see how that goes, and then we can look at FQL. Okay,
we can start with simple. You already sent me something like we're gonna do a to-do app, so we're gonna call this to-dos or planner, whatever. New experimental feature to quickly copy the definitions of your collections, indexes, blah blah blah, migration tool. I can just click save, right, and move on.
Yeah, you just give it the name. By the way, I don't see the whole screen, but
you don't see the whole screen again? Oh, I forgot.
No, it's hard to follow.
Okay, now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna click save. Maybe that's why you were missing on most of when I was pointing to things and you were like, what is going on? I don't know. I'm left in the dark.
Yeah, I didn't see you, by the way.
Okay, okay.
So basically, another thing that is interesting, you just made a database. You can make as many databases as you want. You can make even databases in databases.
You can
So
make
basically, you
databases in
only need-
databases. Let's not go there. Yeah, exactly. Let's not like I've never seen this term, child databases. Oh, we're just gonna store that in the child database. What?
The reason why that might be interesting is, for example, you have just for organization, for example, you have a database, and then you're going to make it child database, and that's for your tests, and another is local for your local things, or you might have one per developer for his local storage. And besides of that, people also use it to do multi-tenancy in the sense that you're going to give a certain team access to a specific database and another team to another one for a different application. And you just need one account. You don't have to make multiple accounts to get multiple data.
That makes sense. Okay, I like that. Where do we start? With creating a collection?
Well, if you did have the GraphQL schema, so basically if you just go to GraphQL, we can actually upload that if you store it in a file.
I didn't store it in a file. I just have it in my clipboard. Should I store it in a file?
Yeah, we still have to add the possibility to just paste that in, I think.
Unless let's go already. Without creating it. Like, how much can you go from UI without actually doing anything? I would want to go that route if that's simple.
Okay, cool. But the GraphQL will do a lot for you. The only thing you have to do is store the schema in a file, though.
I would still want to go without the GraphQL. Maybe we can do another one with just so we can appreciate what GraphQL is going to do.
Yeah, we'll make another database afterwards and show what the difference is. So basically, now you have a database. You're inside the database, and you can make collection. And collections are just like tables in another database.
So I'm just going to follow the schema that we have here. Send me to do and list.
Yeah, for example.
Okay, so I can go with this is going to be to do. So I have to name it plural, right?
Yeah. That's however you want.
Or not.
It's how you wish. If you, it's just a name. So you will reference it by that name afterwards. So basically, you see two things here: history days and time to live. If you would want to, you can just say, okay, I want eternal history days, and basically what that gives you is that you can turn back in time. You can do query on the database as if the database was 2 years ago. So your database evolves. But you can actually go back in time to see the state of your database.
Oh, wow.
A while back. So that might be super useful for debugging and things like that, or auditing. And some clients actually use that as a feature. So they have a UI where you can just slide and go back in time.
Oh, and then they just apply the database however it was 2 years ago or 3 months ago. That's actually cool. But what if different collections have different history days? How does it manage or...
Well, a specific query can do a join over multiple collections, and you're basically going to say at the moment you do a query, I want this query to be executed at this time.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, and then
but of course, if your collection doesn't have history, then it will just take the time that is still available, right?
Yeah, and TTL optional documents are deleted this many days after their last write.
That's time to live.
Okay.
So if you want a collection that automatically cleans itself up after a while. So for example, a cache.
So if I want to add fields to this collection, first of all, I'm not sure if it works like that, or you just create a document and you're freestyling, putting whatever you want in a document.
FaunaDB is a document database. I mean, and it's completely schemaless. That we might add a schema later on, but at the moment you can put everything in the document as you want. So it's extremely flexible. It's basically just JSON documents. So try it out. Click on new document. And see
and actually you can.
It's basically just JavaScript, and you can enter documents here.
Okay. By a toad. I don't know why someone would put that in their to-do list. Like, doesn't matter. We have ID.
I might.
You might, yeah. Title and completed. Like I hate that I have to write valid JSON every time I write JSON. You gotta do it. Completed is gonna be true.
I understand completely.
And list is optional. Let's just focus on this. So if I save this, save and go back.
If you would want to, you could also make nested things and make an object in an object and everything. If you want.
You can store whatever you want.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm super curious, how will this translate to the GraphQL API? Or in order to have the GraphQL API, you would have to have a schema, right?
Yeah, so basically now we're making a collection ourselves. I think you
Unexpected string.
didn't
Is
put
it
a
for
comma
ID?
after biotode.
Oh, yeah.
There's a comma missing. That's it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we have
now
this.
we have your document.
And we have document. Okay.
Well, now we created a collection ourselves. And basically what the GraphQL schema is going to do, if you upload that, is going to create collection and indexes all for you. So once you upload the GraphQL schema, you will just see that a bunch of collection and a bunch of indexes arrive.
So we wouldn't have to make the list
actually...
connection and the whatever else you have sent me here. Okay.
Yeah, it will automatically do that and make the indexes for it to make the queries efficient. So it will automatically determine, okay, I will need these indexes to make this efficient and to be able to query this afterwards.
Okay.
So the next thing that you see there is indexes.
Okay.
So one thing you have to know about FaunaDB, it's a database that's meant to be scalable, so it could contain massive data. And at the same time, it's pay as you go. So what you want to avoid is that people do by accident select all and just get all the data.
And then charge you like $1 million bill just because someone queried.
Exactly.
Okay.
We don't want to do that to people by accident. So basically, there are two things that are mandatory when you query FaunaDB, and that's indexing and pagination. So you cannot query without an index. There is one FQL syntax, FQL name function basically, that is called documents that has a built-in index, but for all the rest you will have to define your own index. So you could now just click new index and then...
Just to be super clear, I've never made an index in my life. I'm not a database expert. I have no idea what is an index. I know that back in the day when I was working in a team, someone from the backend team was explaining me about index and shit. I was like, I'm never gonna remember this. So just keep that in mind.
let's make it simple. Basically, in a regular database, if you would make your collection and you would put a lot of items in there, and then you would say, okay, I want this to get an entity that has this attribute. For example, you want to search for all people who wanted to buy a toad, right? You could do that and the database won't stop you. But if there's no index on there, that would be so horribly efficient that it will take a long time and will cost your server a lot of work. So basically we avoid that. People can't really shoot themselves in the foot like that. That's basically why you need to specify an index here. You would get away with it in a traditional database not to do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I'm like, I have to ask the question, is there anything that you can do at any time in the future to solve this out of the box? I mean, for sometimes teams like your development team and whoever are always taking the scenario, oh, someone is going to have millions of documents, and if they do that, if they do this, if they do that, they have to optimize it in a certain way. In reality, let's say 50% of the apps don't need any of that. You know, I mean, they're gonna have a small amount, a manageable amount of collections, data, whatever it is, and they can get by. Can you do something automatic that solves the case for those users? And then for the users that are Pinterest, Facebook, and 17 other teams on Earth, they can specify all the nerdy database shit. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And you will actually see that our GraphQL, when you import a schema, actually does something like that. So basically it's going to make it all for you. But the thing is, if you want to specify indexes automatically, you want to make sure that your querying is still efficient, you have to know how the user will use the data. That's what your schema in GraphQL actually specifies. In the long run, we might actually do the same for anything that is not GraphQL. So to make it easier, exactly for the kind of users you're saying.
Yeah, I get what GNCL Morais is saying in the chat. The thing is, like, it makes sense what you're saying. Like, when you have the schema, you already describe the relationships that I can have between my documents and stuff. So yeah, I get what you said. Let's start with a schema instead of doing this manually. Well, let's finish it manually, and then we're gonna do it once with the schema. So what do I say for index name, for example?
You can choose. So that is just going to describe your index, and you will use it to reference to your index afterwards. But let's say, what did you put in the to-dos again? What attributes did it have? Let's just make one.
Title, ID, and completed.
Yeah, let's just make an index to-dos by title, for example.
The case doesn't matter. To-dos by title like this.
As long as you write the same case if you do a query afterwards, then
okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, to-dos by title. Terms, optional. Lookup term. For example, if you want to look up user details by last name, data, last name, lookup term.
This is what you're going to use if you search for a certain title.
So do we put something in this too, or just leave them as they are?
Yeah, because we're making an index that we will search by title. We will just put title in the terms.
Title in the terms, but in values.
Yes.
Wait. Oh, this is adding a second one. Okay.
It's okay like that.
Values the field to be covered, leaving it blank, defaults to all these options. Okay.
And just click save now.
I'm just curious to go through the options. Okay. If checked, maintains a uniqueness constraint on combined terms and values. Indexes with the unique constraint must also be zero. Okay, sure. Save.
Well, uniqueness. If you would put it on now, then there can't be any to do anymore with the same title as another to do. That's how it works.
Oh, okay.
And serialized is actually the opposite of eventual consistency. If that gives you an idea what it is.
Okay. Should I keep it on? I think it was on. Yeah.
It's on by default.
All right. Save.
It's a good idea.
Search documents. Select the data.
If you would just now type in the title of your to-do, you will find it.
But I would have to specify the exact title, right? Which is by a toad. By a toad. Search. Okay, it gives me the documents. Got it.
So now you have in your application the capability to actually find a specific to-do efficiently with an index. And this is just a UI that lets you do that easily.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Got this part. Next, let's go through the entire UI before we import the GraphQL function.
What are functions? Does stored procedures tell you something?
No.
So basically, functions are pieces of code that will run on our site. So you can actually specify a Fauna function here with the Fauna query language, and instead of writing that query in your front end or in your Node.js, you're just going to tell Fauna execute this function. So basically, the code to execute that query will live on our site. It has certain advantages, for example, security. So there's no way you're going to execute something else because everything is encapsulated in that function. And you're just going to say you can or you can't execute that function. It has other advantages as well. Imagine you wrote a query in a front end.
Okay.
And that front end might be deployed as on mobile, for example, due to some process and on different platforms. And then you want to update that. You never know whether it's updated completely until people close their browser, until everything is through the process. And by using a UDF and just say call, you can just update this function and it will always be instantly updated for everyone. That's the other advantage.
Okay, that makes sense. But okay, let's dive into it more. Like, what is role admin server?
This is just the security role that you're going to give at this function. That means the function can get the privileges of that role. So if you don't give anything, it will probably be able to execute this because that's just a sum. But if you would say, I want to get a to-do there, then it won't allow you. Because by default, you don't get access to anything in the database. You have to specify exactly this should be accessible by this key, by this token, or in this case, by this function.
And in the function body, or whatever is this? I mean...
This is FQL.
Oh, this is FQL.
So,
okay.
Yes, this is the Fauna query language. And it's quite different than everything you've seen before.
Yep.
Everything in here are actually basically, since this is the JavaScript flavor of SQL, everything in here is just functions. So everything you define in SQL is functions. You can actually even write, put a JavaScript variable and then reuse them in other queries as well. So basically what you see here is exactly how you would write it in a functional language. So you're just going to write, there is a lambda, and in this case, that's a function. You're going to define a function, and that function is just going to add 2 variables. And in this case, the function only takes 1 variable. So if you would execute this function, you would put 2 in there, you would just get 4. That's what it does.
Okay, let's actually, I'm super curious. Like, let's write the dumbest function that can do something with our to-dos. Is that possible, or is it too early?
That might be possible. It might be necessary that I help you a bit through Twitter or something.
Okay, somebody says, can we write our own functions for that body?
I don't get that. Can we write our own functions for that body? We can completely change that body. This is just an example, if that's what you mean.
No, I guess they mean like query is a function that you define, lambda is a function that you define, add is a function you define, var is a function you define. Can people define their own function definitions? I guess that's what he's asking, what they're asking.
Well, since it's just functions... Since it's just functions, you can actually just write another function, just a plain JavaScript function that combines a few SQL functions together. So yeah, you can write very complex things.
Okay. Not judging, go ahead guys, super curious about this. Yeah, still, I'm super curious, how is it gonna go? So we're not gonna write a function for now, because you said I'm gonna need some help. Let's move on, let's see what else is there. We have the shell. Oh, there's that.
This is the shell where you could actually just start writing functions if you would want. There's a few example queries there, which is just get the collections that currently exist, get the indexes, or get the databases that currently exist. Since you only executed the last one in this case.
Oh, so based on the line that you're on, it executes one, right?
No, actually, it executes all of them.
Okay.
You just don't have databases because you can only see the child databases of the database you're in.
Yeah, you're right. It executed everything.
The last one is
right now. Collection is just this. Okay.
Okay. And basically, if you would want to get all to-dos, you would just write first collection. With brackets, and then write the name of the collection in there. And I have to warn, as I said, the language...
Like this? No.
Collection without a S.
Oh, just collection.
So that's just going to reference the collection. Then around collection, you're going to write documents.
Where? Around? Here?
Yes, just like a function that wraps around it, exactly.
So documents around this. Okay. Oh, and just run it? Oh, okay, it's gonna give me the documents. What if I want to say... Oh, okay, this is paginate, actually. Okay.
Yeah,
where is
the
documentation for this? I'm curious just to look at what is out there.
Just look in FQL and look, for example, at FQL's cheat sheet. That gives you a good overview of what is out there.
Oh, FQL cheat sheet.
FQL in every case. So these are all the functions that you can actually combine, and it's just like a regular programming language. We also have a map, we also have a for each and things like that. And that makes it actually easy to combine very complex queries. So the first query you will write, you would say, it's very verbose. But from the moment you're going to do a transaction and say, okay, I want to update my to-dos, and if I update this to-do, I want at the same time update another to-do, but I want to make it conditional. I only want to update it in this case. These kind of transactions are very difficult to write in other languages like SQL. In FaunaDB, that's actually super easy. At first, it seems a bit like something completely new that takes a while to learn. But once you get the hang of it, you can actually see that it's super easy to combine queries and generate queries.
I mean,
so the complete GraphQL layer is actually just generating FQL.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, for someone that hasn't, like, I haven't written any low-level DB. The last low-level DB stuff I've written was in college, which was like zillion years ago when I wanted to pass the subject about databases. That was it. So as someone who hasn't written it, so I'm always using higher abstractions. Like, I'm fine with learning a new thing. If it gives me as much power, whatever it is, it's still gonna be new for me. The weirdest shit that I've written in my... Have you heard of this Marie programming language?
No, I've never seen. By the way, I saw someone had asked how many
How many
big
records
the
you can
free
save in free
is.
tier? Yeah.
Basically, the read operations are like 100,000 per day. Write operations are 50,000 per day. I've never got there, and storage is 5 gigabytes.
Mm-hmm.
I've
So
never
it should
been
be pretty
able to get
generous
there
for
by developing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Aditya says my wish came true last stream on FaunaDB. Awesome. This is the shit that I was talking about, Mary. Like it's a assembly language, and we were
that indeed looks like assembly. Just
yeah, and we were supposed to implement like language features on top of assembly, and I actually loved it. Like once you at first it's frustrating, and it's like, oh, this looks like nothing I've ever written. Then like, oh, it makes your wheel spin. It's like, oh, okay. So I don't know if it's good or bad that FQL that FQL actually reminded me of Mary, but yeah, from what I can see from the cheat sheet,
I don't think that was the goal, no.
Yeah.
But yeah,
this
by the way,
resemble an
it's
assembly.
really, really good. It's I think it's one of the most generous free tiers you can get, because one of the users also said that. But I think we get a lot of feedback from our users that at first it seems completely different, and then when you just see that it's just function composition, and you can actually just write a JavaScript variable, say var function, that's like you write the new JavaScript function, I mean, which just has a name, and it would look exactly like FQL. So somebody wrote a complete FQL library that extends FQL that is just pure JavaScript. So you wouldn't be able to do it in another language, and that's pretty cool. I wrote, for example, a super complex function that checks the in pure FQL the distance between two lat longitude points in meters, which is quite complex to write. I wrote it completely in FQL, and I can just now use it as if it was the FQL. And these kind of things are pretty difficult in other querying language because they're querying languages. FaunaDB is both a query language as a transactional language, so you're going to use it as a normal language. But of course,
are you referring to this package, by the way, or should I close this? Is it this?
No, for example, the user is called Agile library, FaunaDB Agile. So EIGEL, and then library afterwards.
You can maybe send it to me.
Yeah, I'll just send the link.
Yeah. But there are a lot of things. Like when you start diving into this shit, there's a lot of things going on. DB example, Go driver for FaunaDB, Scala and Java. It'd be lovely to write Java for FaunaDB. I would love that.
And it's actually the first thing there, by the way, that was on your page.
Okay.
But this is perfect proof of concept if you're going to look. So he just extended the language. And the cool thing is it's just a combination of FQL functions, and if you would use it, it would look exactly as FQL.
Yeah. But where would you, like, let's say you want to use this library, where do you use this? Do you host your own serverless or server, whatever, that's going to sit between Fauna and the client, or how would you use this thing?
You can use FQL just from the front end, from a serverless function, or from just a server, Node.js backend, or we have actually about 8 or 9 language drivers, so it doesn't really matter. You can use it everywhere. It's basically JavaScript that is going to be sent to the FaunaDB client.
Okay. Moving on, what do we have? We're done with the shell. Now it's time, I guess, for GraphQL Playground. And it asks me to... let me just... maybe if someone has a question, now is the perfect time to ask a question, or to sip beer, or to just sit in silence. You can meditate. But if you have any questions for him while I create a freaking file, it should be .graphql, right?
It doesn't really matter, I think. But yeah, I typically call it GQL.
Okay. I'm gonna get this to do. Or should we go with a more complex example, just to make our life complex? Yeah.
Let's try the more complex example.
The accounts and profiles and whatever you have sent me here. So people who are into GraphQL, this is the main thing. This is the main way they're using Fauna. They're driving it from a schema, right?
Yeah. People who are using GraphQL will import a schema, and then they can start querying their GraphQL and entering data and everything. One thing they can do, in case our GraphQL is not enough for them, they can actually write a function. As you saw in the dashboard, you have functions. They can write a function and just let that function be the resolver of the GraphQL. So in case there's something you can't do, you can always escape to FQL.
Okay. Okay. So what we have is what he sent me here is this to-dos.graphql file, which is just a schema. So we have an account with email and profile. We have relations between things. So account is related to profile. Profile is related to a list of projects, list of skills. And we have definitions for projects, name, and a list of profiles. Skill is name and a list of profiles. Query, we have all profiles, accounts by email, skills by name, register, and login. So it's actually not that complex for a schema.
And I think the things you want to notice there is the relation that's just a tag to indicate its relation. Unique is going to make an index that ensures that nobody makes an account with the same email twice.
One thing I've noticed is there are no IDs. What is up with that?
Well, FaunaDB makes its own IDs as well for each entity, so you don't really have to do that. So it makes its own references.
But if you want to query it later on the front end with a GraphQL query, if you want to query all profiles or accounts with ID, can you add the ID and it's going to come from Fauna, or how?
I'm actually not entirely sure about that because I didn't use the GraphQL that extensively.
Okay.
And the other thing I want to notice is the resolver there. That basically is going to call a function because that's authentication and it's not really a part of the GraphQL.
Which resolver?
So after register, it says resolver. That basically is going to make a user-defined function in FaunaDB that you have to fill in then.
Ah,
so that's
okay,
the way
that
you do
makes
custom
sense.
things that the GraphQL can't do for you.
Rezavar is asking me your opinion so far. So far, I like it. We're gonna see where it's gonna go with the schema. And he said, do you have to join for many-to-many relationships?
Well, here is a many-to-many relation. If I'm correct, I think skills. There are many-to-many relations, and what it will do is will automatically make an intermediate collection for that, on which it can join, and it will make the indexes for you to do that. We can actually see that if you import a schema, we can immediately see what it did with that.
Let's get this out of the way, and I'm gonna import the to-dos.graphql. Let's see if it's gonna work. Okay, so this gives you GraphQL, and if we query something. Okay, let's see what happened. Do I need to do something or not?
No, now your GraphQL is ready to be queried.
Okay.
But what you can see now is indeed that you have a bunch of collections which are created, and there you see profile_projects. That's basically your many-to-many intermediate relation.
Yeah. Okay, and then it created a bunch of indexes like accounts by email, all profiles.
Yes.
How manageable is this when you have like a huge schema? Are you maybe planning to simplify or group these indexes somehow in the UI? Because UI right now, even with this schema, it looks a bit messy because it's like,
yeah, I agree.
You cannot visually group what's going on.
I agree that it might be a good idea to actually start grouping them, but at the moment that we didn't do that yet. But it's definitely a good idea. Yeah. Because I tend to have the same ID when I see all these indexes that are generated for me. But the idea is, of course, that you don't have to manage it. The idea is that we do it for you, and you just adapt your schema, and the indexes are generated for you. Of course, it might still be useful, but because it's not unimaginable that there's something you want to do that is so complex that you want to create a custom index and a custom function to do something with that index.
Okay. If we ever want to update the schema, what do we have here? We have account, email, and profile. If I want to add name to the account, which I'm going to do right now, name, we're going to call it string. I save the schema. And I would have to re-upload the file, or really, why doesn't it allow me to update it here? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I agree, but that's
like it should be super straightforward to edit the schema from within Fauna. Why do I have to keep it in a file?
We definitely will do that.
Okay. So I'm just guessing your next updates. And override schema, Overriding a schema will delete. Okay. So
That's the
if I
difference,
update
yes.
it, let's see what it's gonna add if I managed it correctly. Okay, schema update successful. Probably nothing's gonna change. Yeah,
No, because
because
you
I
don't have
just added a
data in there
field
yet.
and that's it.
Exactly, and since you don't have documents and it's schemaless, you don't see that.
Okay, all profiles, data, name. Right now I don't have any. And for to-dos, he didn't do anything because to-do wasn't in the schema. Okay. So if
You
you
could actually
wanna...
already...
Yeah?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, you could actually already create a profile normally from the query. So you could add one to see how it looks and how it can be queried afterwards.
What do you mean you
There
can
should
add a
be-
profile from the query? You mean
You can write a query mutation now. That just
mutation.
creates a
Yeah,
profile
okay.
that's already provided.
Is it the register one?
No, just it would be mutation create profile
Oh,
normally.
okay. Create profile. And then we put in data, have name, toad,
Yes.
and icon. Prince was an icon. I don't know.
Yeah.
Skills. This
And then
was...
of course you can decide what it returns afterwards.
Yeah. Let me see, like, what is it gonna let me do? Oh, I can create a profile like that. Yeah, because let's see, in profile, name is mandatory, icon is mandatory. What if I just add Toady without anything? Wait, where am I screwing this up? No, I'm not screwing it up. Okay, Toady. Oh, it's not gonna let me. Okay, so the mutation knows based on the schema that I can that I must provide the required fields. Okay. But if you don't use the mutation, there's no validation about what can I put in a collection, right?
What do you mean?
So if I use Fauna directly without GraphQL, I can push anything in the profiles collection, even if it doesn't make sense to the GraphQL schema. The GraphQL schema doesn't constrict it in any way to tell it, hey, you cannot do this.
No, if you would use FQL now to make one, or you can actually go to the collection and add documents yourself.
Yeah.
Then you can add things that are, because it's schemaless basically, so you can add whatever you want.
So now if I query for the profiles, we're gonna get this Toady thing that I added, right?
Normally.
Or what if we go to profile and actually we add a document and we put gibberish equals trash. That's a valid document, by the way. So
yes.
Save that. So now we have a little bit of a mix-up in our profile. We have this. How will GraphQL navigate this? Cannot return null. Okay, so now it's completely broken and you cannot... Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the goal.
Yeah, but I'm just curious in which ways. Like, I'm thinking when the schema evolves or when you eventually want to, I don't know, change the way you do things, but you already have stuff in collections. Like, how would you do migrations for existing data and stuff? I'm super curious. Like,
that's a question that I can't really answer because I have not been working with GraphQL enough, but I do think it's a question that comes back a lot and that we have to improve upon in the future. So
okay.
There are two ways to do migrations. There you update the schema here, but you can also update the schema by just sending it to an endpoint via a script. So you could actually script also your migrations if you want.
Okay. What about things like I don't know, let's talk authentication, because right now I can see these two functions were added, but it's just using a board and it's saying function was not implemented yet. So if I actually run register with whatever, the mutation is there and it's going to call the function, right?
Yeah, and now it's going to say this function is not implemented. Because it just creates the function for you, it doesn't know what it has to do because you didn't specify that, so it can't know that.
So it's going to say was not implemented yet. So the only way to implement this function would be writing FQL here. Or what is the alternative? If I want to write JavaScript or whatever to write this function, would I have to compile the JavaScript to FQL and put it here? Or is there another way to define functions?
This is the way to define functions, but what you're seeing is actually very close to what you would be writing if you would use the JavaScript driver. It's just functions basically.
Okay, so let's try to write it. Otherwise, you can just send me on Twitter this function for making let's just make the register function. So I would remove the abort. Let me
see
zoom
if
in.
I still have it somewhere.
Yeah. You're like, it's gonna be simpler if I send it to him or if he writes it for 30 hours. What do you think so far, chat? Like, what are your opinions? What are your questions? I don't even know how many people are here. Whoever's watching, thank you for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe because we're gonna do this. Tomorrow I'm doing This Week in Web Dev, which is the show about what happened this week in web dev. But we're gonna do this learning thing every Friday. So make sure to follow or whatever you do on Twitch. Okay, so this looks pretty straightforward. I'm gonna copy this. I don't need the query around it, right? I just do the lambda. Or do I put the lambda?
You do need the query.
I do need the query. Okay, okay.
Yes.
What does query? Also, there needs to be some prettify button here to prettify this because it's gonna be annoying to format this manually, especially because it's SQL and I have no fucking idea how to format SQL. So, do you have some internal prettifier or a VS Code extension or something that formats this?
I just use ESLint on this. It actually works perfectly fine.
No, but not ESLint, so, something that does it for me. Like does Prettier understand SQL or not? Yeah,
because it's just JavaScript functions. So this flavor, if you would actually just use the JavaScript driver, you would export the query, the lambda, the create function from the driver. You would use that. These are functions that are exposed by that library, and basically it's just JavaScript. If you would use the shell, basically you can actually even define JavaScript variables in there because it's using the JavaScript driver. So
when I use the query function, that's if I go to the database, if I go to the docs, sorry. API references, no, FQL functions, and if I look at the query function, I want to see like what is the definition of the query function. Where can I see that?
Yeah, it's
here, I guess.
Yeah, try to search in doc just for query.
The first execution of a lambda function. So this is nothing GraphQL specific, from what I understand, right?
No, that just means that the lambda function is not executed immediately.
Preventing immediate execution and making the function available sometime later. For example, when calling a new function, a create function. Okay, got it.
You can just see it as something mandatory you have to do if you define a function body. You just have to do query in front of it. So
got it. And if we see
you don't need it a lot.
Lambda, it's an anonymous function. Fair enough. And then we have in the first parameter is an array with 2 strings. How can I make this typed in a way so I can say in JavaScript you can, but I don't know if you can do it in a function body. But if you would just use the JavaScript driver, you could just use arrow functions there. Okay, and when I put them in an array, I don't have to put them in a specific order. I just define what this lambda can accept, right?
You just define, these are just the parameters of the lambda.
The parameters, okay. And
so once you're going to call this function, you have to just provide them in the same order, the email and the password.
But with GraphQL, when we make the mutation, we don't have an order. We provide just an object with email and password.
Actually, you're going to call that function. I'm not entirely sure how that works.
Let's see. Let's save it. Okay, I get more or less what it's doing. Let me just try to save it and go back to GraphQL. Go back to create profile. Create profile, data name. No, to register, sorry. Try to register.
Yeah, that's it's actually provides you the email and password. It takes it, so.
Oh, wait, what?
Did you save it, by the way, or not?
Yep, I saved it. I saved it.
Okay.
I saved it, but when I run register, it just returns, instance is not unique. So basically this was created. Why it cannot return? But it cannot return because it's not there, you dumbass. That's why it cannot return. Okay, so this works.
Okay. Let
me go back to it. Like it seems, I want to catch,
But so basically until now you have been adding things, documents with attributes, and you never saw the data field, right? That's a field we don't, so everything you enter in the, if you're just going to make a document in the UI, when we did that, you don't see the data field. Well, now when I create the account, actually specify a data field. There you see it. But from the moment you make a new document, you will not specify the data field. But if you make it from a driver, you're going to specify a data field because there might be other things you want to specify besides data. And that's what we see in the register. You're actually specifying credentials there as well. And credentials and password, in that credentials is a special field that will be encrypted by us. And that's something you can use later to log in.
So
you can actually
wait a second.
log in
How
with
does it...
this database
Okay.
entity.
So whatever fields I put inside of credentials, so besides password, if I have something else like a secret,
There's currently nothing else besides password there.
oh,
It
so
has to be password.
you cannot put, and I know right now, but if I want to add something, like some, I don't know, my favorite pet or whatever,
then it's just not going to do anything with that. And so the credentials and passwords will never be returned from the database.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can put credentials on any database entity that you want. So basically, you could log in with an account, you could log in with a user, you could make a share link, for example, with a sort of credentials or anything.
If I copy this function here, and I call this create to do, and this is gonna take a title for the to do and completed, and it's gonna create. I think I called it to dos.
Yes,
here, if I specify credentials for the to do, and if I want to call it secret, can I call it secret, or it must be called password? I don't get it.
It must be called password.
So I can put password to any collection that I want, but only password, only the key called password.
Yes, but I think that was something they did because they might add other things later than password. But currently, credentials and password is the only thing you can do.
Okay.
So it's just something that is very specific. We know what credentials and password is. We will encrypt it, and it allows you to log in later on. Okay.
So now when I create this collection, I can put whatever I want in the data, right? This is not restricted in any way by the schema. So I can say that everyone will be called Mary for some reason, and that's gonna work when I register someone who's not called Mary. If I query their name, it's gonna be Mary. Okay.
Yes.
And if I want to use any variable, I just use the var function coming from you, and then I reference the variable that I want. Okay. Yeah. If I put a third key here, whatever.
That's not going to do anything. They're just going to be ignored.
I don't trust you. I think this is gonna go straight into the collection. It's gonna fit like a glove. No, it's not. You're right. I should trust the person more. That's why below here it says clueless person, and there it says FaunaDB expert. That's why.
I might be wrong though. But if you go to collections, by the way, you actually see something there as well that shows the temporality of FaunaDB. So when you looked at that, if you click open one of the documents, you actually see besides of data, there is also a timestamp, which is automatic. Everything is timestamped in FaunaDB. That's part of the temporality and what allows you to go back in time. You would be able to say now for this entity, I want to see all events on how it changed through time. And the reference, you asked at a certain moment, are there no IDs? FaunaDB creates references automatically, and we'll actually use these references as well to actually traverse things.
Does the timestamp represent created time or updated, or is there a way to keep both created and updated? Is there a way to keep both?
If you want created, then you store it yourself with the time function, with the now function. I think I don't recall by heart. But updated will always be updated every time the timestamp will always be updated every time you update it.
Let's say that I want to have created, but I would have to update.
If you really want that, yeah, if you really want that, you can always go back, look at all the events and take the first event, and you have the created time, of course. At least that is given that you have history for your collection.
What do you mean by look at all the events? Where can I look for all the events regarding this document in the collection?
Well, I would have to send you the SQL query.
But they're stored somewhere, they're just not shown in the UI.
Exactly, and they're called,
that's cool.
There's a SQL query that's called events, and then you will see actually how the entity evolved over time. You would see every update, every delete of an attribute over the whole life cycle.
Oh, that's sweet. And then you can put that in your queries, functions, in whatever way you like, and use it.
Yeah.
That's epic.
Sadly, it's not really exposed yet in GraphQL, so that's the pure SQL function.
No, but I mean, you can put it in SQL functions and then expose it to GraphQL in a way if you wanted to resolve a query You can write a query. You can write something in your schema that says how many times the user was updated, and you can get that automatically from querying the number of updates that item got using FQL in a function, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And yeah.
Samuel says update one account to see history. Actually, that's what I wanted to do. Like if we want to update an account, I would have to make a new function, right?
Yes.
We're gonna call it update account or update profile, whatever we're creating. Profiles or accounts? No, accounts. So I'm gonna make a function update account, and here I guess I would need ID.
I'm actually wondering whether there's no updates provided out of the box with a GraphQL. I'm wondering myself now.
Okay.
There might be useful to check before we.
Yeah, let's see. Mutation, update. Yeah, there is update profile.
I thought so.
And it takes ID. But if I want to do it through a function, that's also
you can,
possible. Yeah, okay. Okay. What if I want to customize this up? Let's say I want to have a custom update profile. I don't like that. First of all, where can I see this update profile? Was it defined in the schema? I think it was.
I think you get it by default because you created an entity.
Yeah, I get it. What if I want to hide it and not expose it to my GraphQL API at all? Is there a way to control this? Because it wasn't in the schema.
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I would have to ask our GraphQL guys because I'm work mainly on FQL for now.
Okay. Note to self. Next time, bring the GraphQL guys, not the FQL guys.
You can, however, block it completely with security roles. In the sense that now you get access to everything, and that's because you currently have a key that gives you access to everything because you're in the dashboard. We don't want to limit you because you're basically testing, right? When you're going to access it from a JavaScript driver or anything, you have to create a key.
Okay. I mean, so far, a lot of things are clicking, and I'm still, like, I would have to try it in order to see. We're not going to have that much time to dive into authentication that much. And what other things you have except... Let's just, before we go to this, let's see the login part. I'm curious.
Yeah, but actually, to complete my story, it's just useful that you just check security and then check new role, manage roles.
Manage roles.
Then you can actually, you just create a custom role.
Okay.
And here you can actually see that you could select a collection in privileges, and privileges is what you give access to, and you would be able to say to-dos, and then you can say, okay, a user that is logged in can read, write, create, delete. You can actually select which one. So that way you can actually say, okay, he can read and he can create, but he can't update because you would not.
You can also make an FQL thingy here to protect this instead of just saying they can read. Wow, that's cool.
You can write rules completely in there, and you see the identity function there. Identity is basically the currently logged in entity.
Fucking awesome.
So basically you can write very, very custom complex things in there.
Okay.
And if that's not enough, you put everything in a UDF and you just say you can only call this UDF. User defined function, I mean.
Yeah. So Samuel, he says FQL is like fuck query language. Let me tell you something. From what I see so far, FQL is the future. Okay, 7 years from now, when all of you are like, oh, finally we should drop whatever database we're using, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, Kitze predicted it 7 years ago. Because when I saw this function thingy, like I wasn't convinced with the checkboxes. I'm like, yeah, but roles are usually more finicky. You know, you have more rules. Well, bam, you get functions in a UI. You write them here. FQL, super powerful. I love this.
The most interesting part to see is actually the write function that's provided there by default. So if you go to the write tab and that function,
okay,
and if you uncomment that one, you actually see that the function takes in 2 parameters, old data and new data. So depending on what you update, you can actually also block it. You can say, okay, I don't want the person to update his attribute, for example. I don't want that attributes should always be the same, and else I block it. You can do very complex things in there if you want.
Okay.
And you could also even write the same kind of functions on indexes to block reads, and you can use these indexes to only expose a part of your collection, for example, since indexes are like views.
Okay,
But
so
yeah,
when I
that's going
choose
too
to-dos
far.
by
Let's
title,
go.
I have read and unrestricted. Okay. I'm pretending that I understand what is going on here with the indexes, but okay. Click in the
Well,
code.
an index is going to return a few values. You can actually say my index is like a view and will return the title and something else. And then you can actually say a user can only access this index. He can't use the collection itself.
Okay,
He can only
okay.
read the index, and then you can even secure more by just only allowing him to see these attributes.
Question about
Can
file uploads.
FaunaDB handle file uploads? As if you mean that we are good for storing big CSVs or media files, then I wouldn't do that on FaunaDB. I would use something for like Cloudinary and store the
Just
link
store the
instead.
IDs. Yeah. Fair enough, I mean.
So FaunaDB is an OLTP database. So if you have an application, say like Twitter, for example, that has a lot of transactions, a lot of updates, that's ideal for Fauna. Images, no, not a good idea.
No, it's not like
It's
when
just-
he said
it's
files,
just-
it means like all files are not a good idea to be stored. Now he's gonna ask, what about PNGs? What about GIFs? No.
It would be like, yeah, you also don't use Dropbox to store your messages or transactions of a certain size.
He was
right?
asking images in base 64. Just use Cloudinary for goddamn it. He's trolling. Okay.
You
he says-
can, in theory. I'm just saying it's not the ideal database to do that.
Yeah.
Not going to stop you, you know.
Yeah, can this be restricted with JWT or similar so a client can directly access data? You just tuned
Yeah,
in.
we are actually working on that as we speak.
Okay.
So we're working on accepting GWT tokens and providing GWT tokens ourselves.
Tafelito asks, how do you think it compares to Hasura? Let's not go into that. I did a stream with Hasura already. You're gonna do the compare. I would have to use both because right now we're just scratching the surface, both with this and Hasura. Like I would have to actually try them in production to actually tell you. But if you have something to say, Brecht, just...
Well, the difference is basically what's behind the scenes. FaunaDB is made to be scalable and multi-region. So basically, if you're going to access your data, it's going to get to you from the closest by location of FaunaDB. Everything is replicated. So once the data you actually entered here is now available in the US, in Europe, in every region that we are in. So if you're going to write an application on top of that, your users are basically going to get the lowest latency possible from the closest location. That's not something Hasura is doing because it's basically on Postgres. It's a completely different approach.
Yeah.
They focus on different things than us. And yeah, at the same time, they will have to translate their queries to SQL and do a lot of optimizations. We just write one SQL query. That's just a different approach.
First of all, just move the green screen a little bit because now we can see the background just a little bit to, I don't know which side. No, or just move the camera. Move the camera to the other side. To the other. You should be fine.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Samuel, I'm in the same boat as you. Like a lot of my projects, I don't think I have any more GraphQL projects, but a lot of my projects are stuck on Prisma 1 with a Postgres database hosted on Heroku. And it's like way too, like you're relying on too many things working together. And according to me, like that's super unreliable because if one part breaks, you're fucked. Like there are way too many variables playing together just so you have a database. So I'm in the same boat where I'm exploring. That's why I started doing these streams with AWS and Hasura and now Fauna, just so I can see like in the future what would be like the direction that I want to head in. And you know me, the person who hates CLIs, who hates like all the nerdy shit. Like I want to do as simple as possible. If I'm going to continue doing backend stuff, it's going to be in a nice UI like this one, okay? It's not going to be in a terminal writing whatever shit. And to answer whoever asked about what do I think so far, I think you can do more out of the box with this here. Because even getting started with Hasura, I know we said we're not going to compare with whatever, but we're not comparing a database. We're comparing like a hosted solution. We did more here without deploying anything on Heroku, without actually, I don't know, waiting if they're going to release a new version to update it again. And so, like so far, if you ask me, even though this FQL thing is like you have to learn it and so on, but like whatever, it seems like super powerful. you can do. I'm a fan of if you can do more things in the UI. So far this is winning for me because it can do a lot of things in the UI, but you're also not limited in any way because this FQL thing is like super powerful. You just have to sit down, learn it, all the things that it has. Probably you can do a lot of things with just 5% of FQL. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like if you learn a little bit of FQL, you can do most things for like a simple app or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. There's a if, update, do, get, select, let, and if you use these match and index, then you're probably going to be able to do most things. There are a lot of functions and it might seem daunting, but there are a lot of highly specific functions as well, which you might not need if you just write
Yeah,
simple
exactly.
queries.
It's like writing the formulas in Google Sheets. I know 7 things in Google Sheets and I can write most things in Google Sheets, but Google Sheets had shit ton of formulas and stuff that could be complex.
Yeah.
Somebody's saying they're a god. Good for you. Somebody's asking what about somebody says about file management. Probably that's not your priority. We're gonna ignore that. Platform lock-in, any import, export, migration support.
Yeah, we have a data manager that just came out actually to do exports and imports.
As a JSON probably, and then...
I have no idea. I haven't tried it out myself, so I can't really answer that question. Sorry, guys.
Okay, that's fair enough. Can I think of indexes as a read models that are automatically updated when a document changes?
You can think of indexes that are a sort of a view index. So they're both an index and they're also a view, and they're automatically updated when a document changes, and that update can be consistent if you set the serialize to true, the thing we saw before. So that means you either choose to have indexes that are super efficient, or you just choose that are indexes that are always consistent and that won't bite you when you write complex transactions that use data from that index.
Yeah,
I'm not sure whether people have a lot of experience with consistency and eventual consistency, but we might not want to go there. But
you mentioned something interesting before we started the stream, and I told you let's leave that for on stream. You mentioned that Fauna was created by people who worked on the back end at Twitter, or so, if you want to go there and discuss that, I would be super interested. Like, why did they need to create something else?
Well, it's interesting where they come to see where they come from, in the sense that basically they scaled the backend there, and that was based upon the eventual consistent databases that existed back then that were scalable. So things like Cassandra, and they thought, okay, yeah, that's going to improve in the long run, but because it's extremely difficult for someone who has written things on top of such a database, it's extremely difficult to work around the lack of relations, the lack of consistency. In a sense, you're writing complex logic, and then suddenly, due to eventual consistency, there's a kind of error.
Yeah.
These kind of things are just very, very hard to prevent. You have to become an expert in trying to avoid eventual consistency errors to be able to work with that. And at a certain moment, they said, okay, we managed to write so much around it to make it work for Twitter.
Yeah.
We're just going to start a database just to make it work for the rest of the world. That's the idea. And that also shows what it's good at. That's like complex transactions, in the sense, if you're going to get a tweet, you want to know how many likes are in there, how many comments are on there. And what you don't want is that someone likes and that you then go refresh the tweet and that the like is suddenly gone, for example. That's things that happen with eventual consistency. You probably noticed it with some application that sometimes happens. You do something and then suddenly it's gone if you refresh. You don't want this kind of UX.
Yeah, makes sense.
There is support for server locations very soon. You can exactly say, we were actually working on a region selector that you can exactly say which regions you want.
Okay. Wait a second. FaunaDB is from Twitter. Well, I don't know if you can say FaunaDB is from Twitter. It's someone who worked in Twitter.
Yeah, it's from 2 engineers who used to work there.
Yeah, exactly. And Yongeli, to ask your question, if you're not trolling, we're actually debugging why could CZ take a lot of CPU or RAM or whatever, and unfortunately the answer is your app. So I'm gonna point, like, if you're really interested in this, or if someone else is interested in this, sorry for taking this off topic, I'm just gonna point you to this article in our help center called Performance. And the first sentence is, if a website takes 10% of CPU and you're using a lot of devices in CZ, that's gonna multiply by 10 or how many devices you're using. So I was just debugging it this morning. I was like, why do I have only few devices? But then when you multiply how much your website is taking CPU or RAM, whatever it is, then you have to multiply it in CZ, and there's no way around it except upgrading your hardware or whatever. So if we want to actually read about this, I'm just going to put this in the chat or wherever you can access it, and we're going to move on. Because we don't have a lot of time yet, actually. We have 10 minutes left. We don't want to... maybe we... Like I did with the other people, we're going to schedule a second stream for, I don't know, a few months from now or 1 month from now, whatever.
Right.
We can dive deeper into it. Let's try to wrap up with... somebody said, you forgot to update that account.
Yeah. I think he wanted to see the events.
You mean this? Oh, fuck it. Like, let's see. Like, we have Brecht for 10 more minutes. Let's see how much information we can squeeze out in order to, you know, to base our decision, whether, and your decision and my decision, whether we're gonna give this a chance, use it for, I don't know, my next pet project or my next huge ass project, whatever. I'm curious, like, the first thing that I want to ask you is, what would be the #1 resource that you would point people for learning Fauna? Is there a course somewhere? Like, usually people learn better from a video course or whatever it is. Is there something you would recommend?
There's actually a video I made recently for Bite-Sized. So the Bite-Sized conference.
Oh, Bite-Sized, okay.
Bite-Sized.
But that's probably a very short. It's not a...
It's pretty short, but it's going to explain exactly how to write a login, for example, and register for a small application and how to actually get started with GraphQL. I wrote a very complex pure SQL application that is actually a kind of a Twitter-like application.
Okay.
So on CSS tricks.
Can you start sending, as we're talking, can you start sending me these links so I can send them to the chat just so we don't miss them later? So you can send me the one and the other, just so I can plug them in the chat. Meanwhile,
second one, huh?
I'm not going here.
Yeah, we're thinking Twitter as a serverless app. We have this one. It's an article. So I'm going to put this one in the chat. If you want to look at this, it's on CSS tricks. Meanwhile,
this one is for people who want to start GraphQL.
Distributed GraphQL databases. Okay, we're going to put that one in the chat. I'm also going to take a look. So thank you for that one. I guess the docs would be another point, but what else?
So the article is only scratching the surface of what the...
Okay, but it's still a lot of things, yeah. Actually, it's a lot of things. It's a huge article.
It's quite elaborate.
Yeah. So the article, the video seems like a good start. Daniel K, I have the same question as you have. What about GraphQL subscriptions and what about real time? How does Fauna do anything for real time or?
Well, since you might expect it automatically because we're a temporal database, we have everything in place to do it, right? And you can actually already implement it yourself at the moment by just looking at the events and writing an index on the timestamp. But we're actually working on implementing that to offer that out of the box as well, both for GraphQL as for FQL. I can't say anything about ATAs though. We really want to make sure that the work is done very well before we release something, so we don't want to push it forward quickly. Yes, I am working on Fauna full-time since 5 months as a developer advocate. I'm not an engineer.
Yeah.
I used to be though.
David is asking about the pricing model. We actually discussed it. We don't have that much time. You can find it on the page fauna.com. Beyblade is asking, is Fauna using AWS as a cloud provider? Is it?
Well, the way that FaunaDB is written, the other database that does global multi-region transactional things is Spanner. But the way that FaunaDB is written makes it easy to actually deploy it on anything. So we can be on AWS, we can be on Google Cloud, we can be on Azure. And we're actually spanning multiple data centers from different vendors.
Wait, when you mean you can, like, you don't need to host this anywhere. I mean, right now what we did, we can just use the database, right?
Exactly, you don't have to host it. We actually want to provide it as a cloud database as much as possible.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that normally it's very difficult to get these multi-region things on multiple clouds because you have to complex clock synchronization and things like that. Basically, our approach works completely different. That's inspired by an algorithm called Calvin, and because of that, we can our data centers are not our data center. Our clusters are running both on Azure, AWS, Google. That doesn't really matter. We can run it everywhere. It can run on commodity hardware.
Yeah. What I like is you do like everything in this UI and then you're done. You don't think about scaling. Will this scale? Should I get this kind of machine, that kind of machine? You don't have to think about that at all, right? You're just writing your things in FQL and you're good to go. About performance, it's never, I mean, you're going to get charged more eventually, but you don't have to think that it's going to go down or whatever.
That's the idea. That's what zero operations on the website means. You don't have to think about it. It's not your concern anymore.
One last thing that I want to wrap up with is the GraphQL thing inside of Fauna seems very clickbaity to me. Like I was expecting to see a lot more GraphQL related things, but it's like, oh, you can use the schema to generate these things in Fauna, and that's basically it. Other than that, it has nothing to do with GraphQL. What are the future plans? Like, if you can give me a sprinkle of hope here and be like, oh, we're gonna go full time.
The future plans are just to make GraphQL, the GraphQL layer, more powerful. At streaming, for example, that's one of the things that we're doing for the future. But the idea is that GraphQL and FQL, that it actually becomes, they just work together.
Yeah.
So you can actually do everything from both, and they will come closer together probably in the long run. But we can't say that for sure yet, how that will evolve.
Yeah.
I can't really say anything about the exact things that we're doing.
Daniel is saying, I'm torn. Firestore is great for... The thing is, there's no ideal solution. You can put whatever list you make, Firestore, Fauna, Hasura, whatever it is. All of them are about trade-offs. And what I'm trying to do with this Friday show is just find what are the trade-offs. Because it's like, not everyone needs real-time. Not everyone needs this. Not everyone needs a history of the collections, whatever it is. So he's like, we can see like what is going on. And then you can decide, do I need these features or will I be fine with another thing, and so on and so forth.
Well, it sounds very marketing, but the idea that FaunaDB was developed was to have a scalable multi-region database without the trade-offs. That's why we provide consistency and relations at the same time. Are we there yet? No, we don't have the streaming yet, but we will soon add that. So at a certain moment, I think we will be one of the best databases that will be out there. But
yeah. I'm going to give it a try for hobby project. Seems like a perfect fit for event sourcing things. Perfect. I'm glad that you would actually find a usage for it. I'm for sure gonna try to use it for one of my projects. I already have an idea for which. I'm gonna learn FQL in my life. That's what I'm gonna do. Anything?
One more link.
Yeah, you can plug in one more link. Meanwhile, I don't know, Brecht, how could you actually promote your own things? I never do that on this stream. Like, I would never talk about the browser for developers and designers. I would never even mention it on stream. Oh, I switched to my screen. I'm gonna mention it. So if you want to check out, we're releasing a huge update. It was supposed to be done today, but today is Friday and we don't want to ruin our weekend. So probably on Monday, there's gonna be the new CZ update, which is gonna be absolutely insane. If you haven't checked it out, go to cz.co to check it out. Yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else to add. Make sure to follow on Twitch, twitch.tv/thekitze, and twitter.com/thekitze if you want to follow the streams or whatever. Tomorrow we're doing a stream about this week in web development. That's all I have to add for myself. Brecht, if you have wait, I'm gonna type out your Twitter URL because people are gonna be lazy. Follow him at databrecht, and it's community.fauna.com. Community.fauna.
So if you want to get started and you have questions, we have a community Slack where we're pretty active in our communities, helping a lot as well there. We have a very nice community.
Yeah.
So join us there if you have questions.
Cool. That's perfect. Thank you very much for everyone who was watching. You can, if you tuned in late, you can always watch this on my YouTube. So I think Twitch is deleting the videos after a while, but they're staying on my YouTube. It's youtube.com/kitze. You can watch the entire video. I think it was pretty interesting. We covered a lot of things. I'm going to make sure to schedule another stream with Brecht at some time in the future, just so we can continue from this point and dive maybe into the more advanced stuff. That's it. Again, Brecht, thank you very much for spending time with me and teaching an absolute noob about things.
I can't hear you anymore.
Oh, you cannot hear me anymore. What happened? Hello, 1, 2, 3.
No idea. I can hear you. I can hear you again.
Okay, yeah, I was saying thank you very much for being on the stream and spending your time with an absolute database noob and for teaching me things.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting this stream.
No
and,
problem.
Actually
No problem.
asking honest questions, because that's how I like it.
Yeah, I
like
want to
critique.
keep this show about honest questions. I don't want to bring a guest and be like, oh my God, your things are the best. No, we have to go. All right. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to see you tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. CEST for the This Week in Web Development stream. And I'm going to continue chatting with Brecht a little bit off stream. So